Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Caroline Kohles, and I am the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. Today on our Positive Psychology Hour, a program that we offer in partnership with the Whole Being Institute, we're going to be doing part 2 of designing, called Designing an Inspired Summer. And I'm going to be doing that with Phoebe Atkinson. As we emerge from the pandemic in the US, the question is, are we languishing or are we flourishing? The New York Times recently had an article about the toll of the pandemic and the toll it has taken on our overall sense of well-being. And many people are feeling drained and their motivation and focus dulled. And some of us might even be feeling anxious, which Elijah Goldstein describes as fear and uncertainty mixed together equals anxiety. So if you're experiencing this or states of this on and off, welcome to the club. It's completely normal during this time. This is called languishing, the opposite of flourishing. And the flourishing is really what this whole Positive Psychology Hour is about. How do we move in that direction, right? Where we're going into post-traumatic growth versus, post-traumatic trauma and strain, right? So if you're interested in moving in that direction, you're in the right place. We're in this session, we are going to tap into the applied practices of positive psychology using the Whole Being Institute's SPIRE. Now, SPIRE stands for Spiritual, Physical, Intellectual, Relational, and Emotional Model. And it's, we sort of joked about it, Phoebe and myself. I'm going to put her on the spotlight. We want you to have an inspired summer. How to have an inspired summer. Hey, Phoebe.
Hi, Caroline. Hi, welcome, everyone. We are so happy that you're here and also those watching the recording. And let's get started.
Yeah, so what I thought we would do is, as we like to do in the Whole Being Institute, start with a mindfulness practice. One of the safest places to be when we are feeling uncertain is in the body. We learned that from, who was on the call with Edie on Tuesday? Yeah, anyone here? Yes, okay, great.
Yes, I was here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lois. So what we're going to do is remind ourselves to come into the body. When we're anxious and stressed, what happens is we go out of the prefrontal cortex and into the back, right, of our brain and into our emotional and kind of limbic, sometimes called a limbic hijack. And how do we get back? Well, we're lucky. We've got something larger than our head. We've got our whole body to help us. So let's start by just tapping gently right here and on the face and on the head. Oh, that feels nice. And I know for me, I'm sensitive, right? I'm sensitive to those areas. And go ahead and you can tap your shoulders and gently on your chest. And anybody else want to tap their back? Right. And then your legs. Yeah, just tap. You can see on my legs, I'm tapping my legs. And here we can be a little bit more aggressive because the tissue down there is a little more sturdy. And then let's just do a gentle brush. Yeah, I see that some folks are brushing their head, some their neck, and that's just like, it's like petting a cat, right? Or a dog or an animal. When we do this, it's havening, it's very calming. The healing power of touch. And then 3 deep breaths, please. Just place your feet on the floor so you come fully present and feel the sensation of your feet. You can close your eyes if you like. I'm going to sense my feet on the floor. I invite you to as well. And my legs. And see if you can let go of any tension that you might have, just a little bit of tension. See if you can let go of that. As you breathe in and out, And I would like you to breathe into the back of your body. I'd like to invite you to breathe in to the back and fill in the back of your lungs. And now the sides. And now finally the front. And it's nice to touch and palpate. So we're starting with the senses, everybody. And then softly open your eyes. And let's do one of the practices that we were taught early on in our positive psychology series by Alan. Go ahead and take your hand, and if you'll trace with me, we're going to go inhale and exhale. And you can do it at your own timing. Inhale and exhale. And inhale and exhale. And I can feel it, it's tickling to me. And inhale and exhale. And then down. And what that helps us do is focus not only on the breath, but on another senses, that sense of touch. And do you feel that hand? It's kind of tingly. Anybody want to do the other one? My other hand saying, me too, me too. So inhale and exhale and inhale and exhale. And again, your timing, inhale and exhale and inhale and exhale. And one more, feeling that tingle or whatever that feels like to you. Yeah, rub the hands together. And I know I feel more centered. I wanted to start our session today with laughter and this question. When was the last time you laughed out loud or smiled really wide? And if you would put that in the chat. And the last time that I did that was with Phoebe this morning. We met early and she was telling me, Phoebe, you were so funny this morning. I'm going to put you on as well. She was imitating her voice. You know, she says, I'm going to speak lower in my voice. Do you want to do it for everybody, Phoebe? It was hilarious.
I was using my opera voice just to get going in the morning so I don't have to collapse my throat. So I was just singing and speaking to you from my role of opera singer.
And it just cracked me up. It just made me laugh. So on average, let's see if we've got some folks in the chat. Yesterday, funny thing on TV by Marvin, awesome. Karen said, laughing at my two dogs simultaneously, kiss my husband's face. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. So here's the deal. Apparently, laughing in improv class last night, wonderful. Lois says, with my niece on the phone on Monday, fantastic. Yesterday, a funny TV show from Diana, nice. Yeah, let's fill the chat with when I walk my dog daily and when I went to a comedy club on Saturday. Oh, Susan, that sounds fun. This morning, Zooming with my granddaughter. Yes, yes, yes. So why would I want to start with laughter? Last night with my oldest and dearest friend on the phone, beautiful Nancy, apparently kids laugh all the time. Anybody have a guess on how many times a child laughs and giggles a day? Throw a number in there. Or unmute. 25, says Donna. 200, says Karen. 50 times, says Stephanie. 100. Beautiful. 10, says Susan. All right. Well, who do you think laughs more? Constantly, says Deirdre. Yes, not sure. Who do you think laughs more, adults or kids? Kids. 500, says Margot. Margot, you're not far off. A child on average, they counted, laughs about 400 times a day. Now, how about adults? How many times do you think adults laugh? 5, says Robin. 5. 3, oh goodness, 2. 15 says Karen. 80 says Margot. All right, Margot, you're very generous. 5 says Susan. It's okay, 80. Good. 5. All right, it's actually 15. And this is from the work of, hang on one second. I had it right here. The Gretchen Rubin, The Happiness Project. And Phoebe, can you talk a little bit about her work?
I know she's just a bestseller, and she has bringing positive psychology to Main Street. She's one of the people that is very prolific in her programming and her books. So she's wonderful to check out. She also has done some studies around different styles that people can locate themselves and then capitalize on their different ways of being in the world. So she's wonderful and very creative like yourself.
Yeah, and so the reason why smiling and why we wanted to start with that and laughing is so important is, again, it brings us back into our executive functioning. It opens up. There's a sense of safety. There's a sense of I can expand my mindset. So prioritizing laughter and prioritizing, we're going to talk about that in a minute, positivity, there's a reason to do it. If you're needing to be think your way out of a problem or find solutions or, come out of a pandemic or design an inspired summer. So that's why we wanted to do that. And then finally, last week, we did a wonderful session on, what was it? It was on holding on. What are we going to hold on to? And this was our mantra. And if you want to do this with me, where we crossed our hands at our chest, what do we want to hold on to? And I want to hold on to my relationship with nature. I really got a chance to be outside and see the seasons. And then, yeah, Phoebe, why don't you take the slides down for 1 second?
Okay.
And so I can, and then what do I want to let go of, right? I felt like there was a certain stress that I had to, work all the time, right? So I'd like to let go of that. What do we want to bring in? Can you do this with me? What do you want to bring in, right? I want to schedule my time so that I have that time to walk in nature. And then what do I want to step into? And that is a world that is both virtual, hybrid world, and also in person. So that's what we covered last session. And then Phoebe's going to show you some of the things that you said that you wanted to hold on, some of the things that you said you wanted to let go of, some of the things that you said that you wanted to bring in, and some of the things that you said you wanted to walk into. And the reason for this is we're going to collect a bunch of these things and as a group and kind of collate them into the 50 best ideas. So everybody has those.
Okay.
So anybody want to volunteer and come off mute and read the first one, just for fun? Read one of the ones. Do I have any volunteers? No volunteers? Okay, I'll read it. What I want to hold on to, you said growth mindset, instituting positive habits, learning Zoom, taking photos of birds, gratitude for what I have, learning more about myself, deep connections and deep learning in the positivity hour. What I want to let go of, being busy all the time, the idea that I couldn't get a good strength training workout in my apartment, planning certain relationships that were not healthy, stuff while decluttering my apartment, and expectations. What I learned, after being forced to slow down, I realized I needed to slow down, and now I welcome it. I enjoy being alone. I explored my area more than ever. After having COVID, I'm grateful for every breath of life. I adapted to the lack of things to do and chose to do things on my own. Beautiful. Feeling positive about myself, learned to be more patient. I'm much stronger and brighter than I had realized. It's easier to learn new things than I thought it would be. I learned I don't have to answer every question or be amenable to every request. That's a big one. And I have more things that I'm grateful for this past year than I realized. My toolbox works, said someone, that's great. And InSPIREd, this is inspired by Amy Alpert's work, 50 lessons I learned in 50 years. And so what are the 50 lessons we're, as a community that we're learning from COVID. And I know that we had a question. What's the difference between take on and move on? That's a great question. Phoebe, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So last week, we introduced a model by the Hudson School of Coaching, and it really is about, it's the moving towards model and kind of the cycle that we all go through in any kind of goal aspiration. So we take on, we consolidate our gains during the pandemic, if you will, all the ways we've made changes, we've let go of things. We then start to take on, who are we inspired by? What kind of new attitude or posture or value are we taking on? Last week we asked you, are there any values that were really illuminated during this time that were important to you that you want to take on and really then move forward? So that's the whole kind of change model that it can be applied to the pandemic, although the Hudson School created this change model about 20 years ago.
And then moving towards would be like, what's a goal that I want to, maybe I take on that particular trait or that value, and then I'm going to move towards something. Like for me, I'm going to move towards, how am I going to do my job in both the hybrid world and in a hybrid world, online and in person. Some people will say, I want to take on learning Spanish. I want to take on, really staying connected to my friends that I met and reconnected with on Zoom. I've heard from a lot of people that they reconnected with people from high school and college and all over, right?
Yeah.
And so taking on something might be like, I want to take on staying connected now that we're getting back to life.
Yeah, so just invite you before we get into, we're just kind of pulling through. Last week, we said it was two parts, part one and part two. So consolidating, we asked you also in the email we sent you, do you have any lessons that you want to add to our list? And we'll keep compiling the chat. So just type them into the chat. Is there something that you are moving forward or moving towards, or is there a lesson learned that you would like to type so everyone can learn? That's the thing about learning in community. We all share and learn with each other. We're inspired by each other, and we often sometimes model for each other certain things. So anything in the chat, a lesson learned that wasn't highlighted that you'd like us to know, we will keep consolidating, and we'll have our own 50 lessons, and perhaps we'll even write a blog in inspiration of the JCC Positivity Hour.
Great.
Yeah, there we go. So Nancy says, I learned I can live through severe crisis, even thrive with tools, resources, and people to help. There you go. Karen, learned to be less busy, less programmed, less things on the calendar. We heard that as a theme last time.
And yes, Robin Frank, a sarcastic smile does count.
Okay, so those of you who are with us and those of you who are listening, the spirit of that, again, is that growth mindset to really, as you were talking about agility, Caroline, we've had to be very agile in addition to patience, as was named, and to keep learning and growing. So Sue Deutsch is going to be a speaker for us soon. She said, I'm learning to hone in on the one thing that matters. Fantastic. And Susan Pierce says, I didn't realize it would, I would meet so many people, I think. Yeah.
And Donna said, I learned I need more boundaries than I thought.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so let's keep us moving on. And thank you so much for starting us off in such an embodied way. Oh, here they're coming in. So a little bit, let's see, a few more coming in. Do you want to read those, Caroline?
Sure. Lois was saying that she's just grown immensely. And Ellen was saying, reframing, permission to be human, post-traumatic growth, savor micro moments. I am not alone, Spire.
Yeah. Wow. Lots of great resources there. Okay, so we're going to continue to compile these lessons learned in community. And now we're going to move into today's focus, and we're going to be team teaching. Caroline's going to come back a little bit later. I'll just frame some of the work today. So this was a recent talk that Martin Seligman gave, and he said the skills of well-being are different than relieving suffering. Building post-COVID resilience will require us to move from languishing to flourishing. So these are the very tools that we've been offering all year in our Positivity Hour, the tools that help us to flourish, to thrive, even in the midst of a pandemic. So languishing to flourishing. In psychology, we think of mental health as on a spectrum. This is the work of sociologist Corey Keyes, who wrote the first book called Flourish. And he coined the term languishing. He was a researcher that was studying depression. Languishing is the opposite of flourishing, and I'll get to flourishing in a minute. The symptoms of languishing include burnout, which we've heard a lot about, no motivation, that sense of blah, and numbness. So the dampening down and the languishing, where people don't feel like they have any sense of agency. One of the best strategies for managing emotions is to name them. And this is what Caroline did when we started. You know, when we are hijacked, let's say, by the amygdala or that sympathetic activity, if we start to name what is going on for us and having also that intervention in the body, we can start to calm the nervous system down and have fuller access. So in this very, very important article that came out by Adam Grant just a few months ago, he said, we still have a lot to learn about what causes languishing and how to cure it, but naming it might be the first step. It could remind us that we are not alone and languishing is common and it is also shared. So we wanted to start with really this languishing to flourishing frame. It has really hit a nerve. Everyone is talking about this article. Adam Grant actually was a student of Tal Ben-Shahar at Harvard and is just a brilliant researcher. So he really brought Ivory Tower to Main Street in that article. So he goes on to say that, well, what is the antidote to languishing? There's been a whole series in the New York Times about this topic. What can we do about it? And that's really what our whole series is focused on. The post-pandemic, the answer to that question may be in your hands, is what the researchers have said. A growing body of research shows that there are simple steps that you can take, and that's what we've been presenting all year. So you can recharge your emotional batteries and spark a sense of fulfillment, purpose, and happiness. The intervention that Caroline started us with today, the humor, the activating your positive emotions, we know from the work of Barbara Fredrickson, we can activate a positive upward spiral when we have certain positive emotions, and we can do that very intentionally. The combination of physical, mental, and emotional fitness is what the researchers called flourishing. So if languishing is that blah feeling and we don't really have any agency or we're not mobilizing, flourishing is a compound effect of all these different aspects of when we are physically involved, when we have certain mental thoughts and frames and mindsets, and emotional fitness, when we're agile and when we're able to both welcome all the different emotions and then lean towards what might be most helpful. So it's the exact opposite of languishing, that flourishing is a sense of stagnation, and languishing is that sense of stagnation, and flourishing is where we start to activate all the dimensions of the SPIRE model that we're going to look at today. So Adam Grant ends his article and he says, the end of the pandemic offers us a new opportunity to reflect and to ask a new question. How do I want to spend my time? And Caroline, when we were looking at the lessons learned, we were really looking at people were saying, I'm reprioritizing my values, my time, I'm making choices, I'm simplifying, I'm decluttering my home, I'm decluttering my schedule. So this is a time of reimagining, which is another focus of Martin Seligman's work right now, the idea of imagination, creativity. How can we take the lessons and actually shape our future going forward in a different way?
Yeah, and Kathy was saying, I feel I am languishing and I so needed this session today. And Marvin was saying that understanding myself by connecting with others and understanding them was one of the things that he learned. And Deb too said it reinforced my resilience this time. So it's great to just, as Phoebe said, start with naming it. Where am I today?
Yeah.
And and Maria Serra talked about that. Can I have an honest conversation with myself and just acknowledge where I am in this moment? And by doing so, we have both the pond and the swamp, as we talked about last week, the reality that we're currently experiencing, and what is also true.
Yes.
And it can help us shift.
And normalizing it, as they said, that this is normal and it is something everyone is experiencing, and we have an antidote to it in terms of these micro practices that we're going to talk about today, but naming it can be very empowering, as well as this question, how do I want to spend my time? So we're going to offer some ideas. How do I want to spend my time if we chunk it down into the summer? First day of July today. So if we just look at even the next week or month or 2 months, we can start to look at how do we jumpstart our positive emotions to help us move from languishing to flourishing and start to have a little bit more of that upward spiral. And we know that positive emotions and motivation are correlated. So we want to be thinking about this very strategically. So Tal Ben-Shahar just published a book, and it's called Happier No Matter What. And he says the science of happiness can help you become happier, even if just slightly, no matter where you are on the spectrum. If you remember Corey Keyes, that mental health is a spectrum from mental illness, depression, languishing to flourishing. So we can be in different places on the continuum. And we also know from the research that came out last year that the stress and also the different interventions, they can coexist, that we can have mental health and some mental distress, and they can coexist, and we can have different ways of helping ourselves be more resilient. So in designing an inspired summer, we're going to start with 3 different points. And stop me sometimes, Caroline, I do see some chats are coming in. I want to get through this piece, and then we're going to move into designing with the SPIRE model.
Sure, there's just one comment, and I think it was from Jeff. It's really wonderful. He says, your comments remind me of the saying, the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken. And then, of course, Ellen shared that Dan Harris wrote 10% Happier.
Yes, exactly. We'll talk about that 10% and exactly with what Tal is saying, and the concept of Kaizen change and incremental change can really make a big difference. As we're talking about this, we're always thinking of micro practices. You know, it's not about going on a Greek vacation, which would be lovely, but it could be about the little interventions, the restorative practices that we're going to remind you and introduce you of today and learn from each other. So here are the 3 points. Prioritizing positivity is a very important concept in positive psychology. The research has shown that trying to be happy is actually a recipe for unhappiness. Barbara Fredrickson did a whole study, and she says that people who pursue happiness by putting themselves in situations in which they are likely to experience happiness, they may reap incidental and life-sustaining rewards caused by the positive emotions they experience. So in other words, when we prioritize positivity, we identify things that we know that are going to activate our positive emotions. We want to actually put those into our schedule. If we are trying to be happy, that actually backfires. So her concept of prioritizing positivity is what we're really going to be helping you focus on today. And that means that you reflect on the activities that you enjoy. And for instance, the research shows that 2 really big activities are positive emotions when you're with people, and also exercise. So social connection, the #1 indicator of happiness, are relationships, as well as exercise. And the social connection, we're going to have to, go gingerly towards that, because all year our brains have been organized around a threat response around contact. So we're going to have to very, very kind of in a titrated way, move back towards connection and kind of retrain our brain to do that. But the good news is the brain has, even though it's dormant in that area, it does know how to connect because we're wired. So the second point is design. We looked at the root word of design. We think about that a lot in positive psychology: self-determination, co-construction, our identity, or shaping our days, as Maria would say. Design is from the root word of designare, to really draw a plan, to have a sense of a plan on paper so you can see it. So as we're thinking about crafting, designing, we really are going to create a plan, whether it's scheduling your day, your week, your month, your summer. And this translates into, again, prioritizing positivity, is that you think of these activities and you schedule them. This doesn't seem like rocket science, but it's very important, because a lot of this is being very deliberate and valuing these micro practices and really experiencing the compound effect. And we're more likely to do things that we enjoy doing. So if we repeatedly incorporate these activities, we will start to have that sense of the upward spiral. They don't have to be large blocks. They can be 20 minutes, micro practices. And then the last big chunk of what we're going to focus on today is the SPIRE whole person well-being. And the SPIRE model, you've seen a lot throughout our program. Hopefully you know it a little bit more, but we're going to do a deeper dive in the dimensions and have you interact with that. The SPIRE model has been created by Megan McDonough, Tal Ben-Shahar, and Maria Serwa. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But the idea is that if we can look at these different aspects of well-being versus trying to be happy, that is the point we're making. So as we think about designing and using the SPIRE model, we had sent out an email to you, but for those of you who are new, the first step is to the antidote to languishing. We've put out what is languishing, what is flourishing, and then the antidote to languishing. You first have to assess yourself. Someone wrote in the chat, they recognize they're languishing. You know, here's this common experience. This is why, and now we're looking at what can you do about it. The Harvard quiz is also in this New York Times article, and it's right embedded in the article. It's very easy to take. Caroline and I took the quiz, or we can use the assessment, the SPIRE model, which is what we're going to do today. We really want you to remember that these are micro practices. So many of our speakers have talked about savoring and gratitude practice, or engaging in acts of kindness, you know, opening the door for someone that can have an amazing benefit in terms of the cascade effect of when someone does a kindness to you, or when you see a kindness, you're more likely to pay that forward. And that's a whole research thread. Communities and connection, these are all the different practices that we can build in more deliberately into our summer. Everyday routines really are correlated with flourishing. This prioritizing positivity. Also trying something new. We know that the pandemic has dampened down enrichment. We haven't been able to have a lot of novelty. So as Dr. Corey Keyes recently said in that article, the first key to feeling good about life is to seek out some new interests and to start to look for the new. One person wrote into the chat last week that they were walking in Central Park more and seeing birds and taking pictures of them, right? So all of the opportunities that the pandemic has afforded us to start to look at different ways we can enrich our lives. So here's the SPIRE model. Tal Ben-Shahar, Megan McDonough, and Maria Serwa, and they studied throughout history all the different exemplars, the researchers, and they came up with these 5 core elements that indirectly lead to happiness. Remember, we're creating the conditions that might activate the positive emotions, and each contribute to a whole person well-being. And so we look at different elements. We're going to make an assessment with you later. And then you want to think about, is there an element that I'm strong in or that I might need a little bit more attention? And so we have the spiritual, which is leading a meaningful life and mindfully savoring the present. Physical, that Caroline just started us with, that mind-body connection, as well as the caring for our body. Intellectual is about learning and being open to experience, being curious. That's that novelty that Corey Keyes just talked about, really engaging in things that capture your attention and expanding your interests. Relational, nurturing a constructive relationship with yourself and others. And then the emotional, having the full range of feelings and knowing that with this research and this application, we can increase our resilience and we can activate our upward spiral through the positive emotions. So here are the 3 steps that Tal, Megan, and Maria created in their sequence of using SPIRE. It's about building awareness, and it's about then moving from awareness into action. The SPIRE check-in is something that they created that is an ongoing way of assessing that we can't really see our progress unless we can measure it. So this is a way of measuring, to take a moment to make this assessment. There's 3 steps to it. That first you ascribe when you do the check-in, the SPIRE check-in, that you look at, okay, I do this a little bit or I do it a lot. So you look at the context and the meaning, and you start to really describe, you ascribe, and you take the test, and then you describe. You look for, why is this happening? What are the specific things that I'm doing? And then the third is prescribe, that it is a way of looking at, is there something that I could be doing that can increase an area of SPIRE that might really help me? in the research, Tal Ben-Shahar talks about that we look at others' actions and we evaluate the outcomes. This is more what he calls me search, that we're looking inside of ourselves, we're experimenting, and as we change, we start to discover about that. So we look at these dimensions of SPIRE, and this is the first thing that we're going to have you do using a different kind of worksheet. But I first want to show you what our colleague Jane Anderson did. She uses SPIRE as a check-in, and she asks herself, in what element am I feeling strong and engaged in? So I just want you to take a note for a moment as you think about this. Am I most engaged in recently in mindfulness and being connected to something greater than myself? Is it a physical aspect of SPIRE that I'm most strong in these days? Is it the intellectual? Is it relational? Is it emotional? So just take a moment, and as we start to work with this model, it might be new for some of you. So the first idea is to ascribe, just to kind of assess what areas, dimensions am I strong in and most engaged in.
And even from a physical sense, sometimes you can say, what does my body move in towards? Like when I read spiritual, does my body move in? Does it move away?
Mm-hmm.
That can be a way to assess.
Mm-hmm.
Or do you think physical, or what is that, or intellectual?
Right.
It's not uncommon, right, Phoebe, to have areas that we sort of focus more of our
Yes,
attention.
absolutely. Often that go with our signature strengths, and we can start to have this whole person assessment. So then we can see, is there an area, and that's the next question, is there an area that's calling to me that I need more attention? For instance, not getting much sleep, or I need to have more contact with people, or I need to spend time in restoration and, just helping myself deal with all that's coming at me. So that second is really looking at the assessment. What could I use more of? What could use more attention?
And this whole idea of whole being, right, which is what the certificate in positive psychology is really about, the whole person. There's so much research that proves that when we're looking at the whole of our being, we're much more well-rounded, and we're much more likely to be more resilient.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right. So actually, people are having some different comments in the chat. We're going to have you interact with this model a little deeper. I just wanted you to see kind of the high level. And so the prescribe aspect is you look at, so what is an action and that I can take that might help me? So here's an example of Jane Anderson. So in order to strengthen her spirituality, here's some examples of behaviors. These are all where the evidence-based strategies start to come into play. We know volunteering is very correlated with well-being. Religion is very highly correlated with happiness and positivity, mindfulness. So that's the spirituality. Do you want to connect in a little bit, Caroline, with what Jane has suggested here in her example?
And also, I think that for some people, when they think spirituality, they think religious, but that's not necessarily what a spiritual means. It could be spending time outdoors. It could be what is meaningful to you, what connects you, right? Mm-hmm. And we have some folks that have said some things in the chat. Do you want me to read those, or just?
Sure, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Robin was saying that I feel there are two different responses I can give. I can give my general outlook, and I can give my daily or even the moment,
that's right.
Which has very shifting results.
Yes.
Is this just me? Can you comment on that, Phoebe?
Yes, it's actually both, Robin. It is a daily, you can do it as a daily assessment for 30 days as a practice. It's really to start to build awareness around these different dimensions. We have the multiplicity, many aspects of ourselves. So you can have a daily check-in, or you can see over time, you can track over time. Do you have a different baseline that starts to shift? Or is there something situational or contextual that is actually, that is the describe aspect of this? Is there a context that it is related to? So it's, yes, a daily, or you can overall see the patterns.
Yeah, and Kathy was asking, mine would be relational and emotional. I had PTSD as a child. I'm 67 and still struggling with the effects today. So would you say to Kathy, like, these are actions that we can take, so she can actually, even with that challenge, she can look at these different actions and strengthen these different areas?
Absolutely. So we're looking at the 3 steps of this check-in, right? The first is just to assess your score on each element. Where am I, 0 to 10? And then I look at the meaning and the context of, okay, well, I'm doing this or I'm not doing that. So maybe that's related, the correlations. And then the third is the interventions, right? All these different tools and skills that we can start to, the prescribed specific actions we can take. And over time, we know we can really increase our resilience and really increase our sense of well-being through really paying attention to these different dimensions.
Wonderful. Lois was talking about being healthful. She said it's the first time in 10 years she can spend time creating art, which just sings her heart.
Exactly. So activating the E, and they're all interconnected, right? It's not just one element. They all impact each other. So let's just continue. So the
before we do that, there was one more request to go back to the previous slide just for one moment.
Okay. And you'll get these slides with a lot of different worksheets that you'll have with you. Yeah. Is it this one?
Was it that one, Ellen? Yeah. And yes, Deb, you will get the slides, as Phoebe said. And Marvin said, working at feeling good has led to happiness. Exercise, healthy eating, being proactive about my doctors and looking to be partners with them, connecting with others, offering support to others. Yes, you're already in the micro practices. This is wonderful, Marvin. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So we wanted to give you a just a certain snapshot. So Jane Anderson, who's been in positive psychology for many years, she's created these a beautiful frame. So physical strength, yoga, workout, sleeping, eating, those kind of things. And then intellectual, the I of SPIRE, reading or writing or learning a new skill. Learning a new skill and teaching it is a huge correlation to flourishing, because you're activating all those parts of your brain, and then you have the relational connection. Working towards mastery, that it's not just the positive emotions that come through, playing, it's also through engaging in deep flow states where we are really learning or teaching. So mastery is a huge part of the I. And then learning new places, traveling, or certainly online, they've had all these kind of classes that are available that people are making themselves availing themselves. And then building quality relationships and working on the E of SPIRE, really helping us to balance and to have a full range of feelings, as well as pursuing the positive. So now we're going to have you do your own SPIRE check-in, and then we're going to have some more embodied practice with Caroline. So if you can get out a worksheet or a pen and paper, and we're going to go back to Jane's 3 prompts. They really correlate with ascribe, describe, and prescribe, which is what Tal said was part of the me search. So in which elements are you feeling strong and engaged in? You can do your own SPIRE check-in right now. We're just going to be quiet. And then which elements could I use more attention? I would ask you to think about 1 or 2. Don't overwhelm yourselves. Let's just start with making it simple. And then what's one action you could take to strengthen one of the elements that might be calling you, as Caroline said. So we're going to give you a few minutes in silence with some music in the background, and then just reflect on your own me search, evaluating, looking inside, and then you're going to experiment next week, hopefully, and you'll come back the following week and let us know what you're discovering. So I'm going to time us, Caroline.
Yeah, and Lois, I think, had a question. Lois, did you have a question?
Yes, my question was, are you guys going to address, like, maybe people have done certain things, taken new classes during the pandemic, and now things are going to change? Maybe those classes won't be offered, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a whole other issue.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And Lois, thank you for asking. I'm just going to quickly speak to that, and then we're going to do this assessment. But in thinking about that model last week that we said, hold on to, let go of, and then, what do you learn and how do you move that forward? If there were elements that you're going to miss that you actually engaged in during the pandemic, then you'll look at what's the element and how might I recreate that? So of course, things are changing, but there are things that are revealed within that if there's some part of that that you have control over, you can recreate that or seek that out, having that knowledge and that self-awareness. So that's just a very brief answer to that one, but absolutely, we have one slide that we're going to give you at the end that speaks to some more of those questions.
Yeah, and that addresses agency too, right, Phoebe?
Yes, exactly. So go ahead and make an assessment for yourself, and we'll share in a bit. So take about 2 minutes. So we'll have 1 more minute. Okay. So we'd love to hear from you before Caroline's going to take us into a consolidating embodied experience of moving towards an inspired summer, using these elements of positive psychology, the SPIRE dimensions, and remembering to prioritize positivity as you schedule them and have this concept of me search as you experiment and continue to build on what you're learning. So typing into the chat, if you will, something that you are taking from your SPIRE that maybe you want to engage in as a practice, or something that you discovered. This is about self-awareness and then taking action based on these different skills, tools, mindsets that are there. So Ellen says, relational, no longer there and not yet there. Stephanie says, I recently did a 30-day practice creating flow in my spire, doing micro practices such as walking in nature, savoring summer fruits, connecting with friends and family, reading, listening to inspirational podcasts, being aware and mindful to those micro moments of positivity in my daily life. So powerful, and it has now become a daily habit for me. Stephanie, thank you so much for that demonstration. Really, in the book Positivity, Barbara Fredrickson really lays out, hour by hour, how she sets up her day based on this research. So it's a great example of all these different micro practices, and they create this compound effect, the broaden and build, really broadening our capacity and our resources. Jill says, some things have changed in the last 2 weeks, and today I plan to take micro moments of adding laughter intentionally and smiling. Thank you, Jill, so much. Kathy, what was the book? Positivity, Barbara Fredrickson. It's all of the positive emotions, her research on the science of positive emotions. And Sue Knight, Sue's going to be our presenter soon. Sue says, one action I can take, putting self-care first and allowing rest, is the same for both my physical and emotional elements that could use more attention. They're actually interconnected, right? They impact each other. And Ellen, it's Positivity, the book is called that. I can identify, Diana says, what I need relational, but I have so much terror, social anxiety, so I have trouble knowing how to take action there. And really, we're looking at the very, very small incremental steps, Diana. These are micro practices, micro steps, just really understanding your brain, your nervous system. All of our nervous system really needs a little bit of titration, a little bit of time out, and then coming back. So starting perhaps with safe people, or imagining the possibility of who would be that first person. Maybe it's about being in community here online. Deirdre says, feel pretty balanced, wasn't paying attention to some eating, so address my fantastic, so grateful for my body. Yes, and relationships are tricky, so I got to know myself better. Yeah, so here are all these different aspects. So I'm going to just remind you of that, Tal's book, Happier No Matter What, these whole SPIRE interventions, they're the micro choices that we can take. And Caroline, you have such a great way of really concretizing this through the body. So do you want to kind of consolidate this a little bit through something special at the end? I know you always do that,
Sure.
The embodied practices.
Yeah, sure. I just, I think that one of the things that we can do, one of the things that I find the most helpful, is to regulate my nervous system, right? And to take back my nervous system. And how do I do that? And one of the ways to do that is by going to the body. How am I, if each of us are alive, and like a car, when you turn a car on, when you turn a Ferrari on, or when you turn a Volkswagen on, they have different hums. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you have a different hum. And I'm going to say that that hum is your nervous system. And can you tell when your hum, when something's off, when it's going, right? Can I get a yes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and can you tell when it's calm?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we want to pay attention to. And we also want, the SPIRE check-in can help us. Our physical, what I find fun is that when I have a micro practice in one area, it seems to impact all of the areas. Anybody else notice that? So for me, going to the physical, once again, that touch. Kristen Neff's work, right, and self-compassion. Yeah, right, Susan. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And then our breath, filling in. I notice, I become aware that oftentimes I'm very frontal on Zoom. I'm leaning forward, right, when I'm anxious. So sitting back into my body, letting my body rest, right? So let's just letting a little bit of the tension go. And if we could do a little Qigong, would that be okay with everybody? Let's do it from a seated position. And what we're going to do, and I'd love to do it from a gallery view. This is a Zoom Unity, and we're going to do this together, right? So I'm going to take off the spotlight, and it's a very simple, and change your view so it's a gallery view. And what I want you to do is reach your hands towards the bottom of your window, so you can see your hands, kind of like Frankenstein. Show somebody your nails, and then turn them over and then pull in. Nice. And let's do that together, and we get to see it like a wave. Inhale, lean towards, and exhale. And inhale, moving towards each other. Move in and exhale. And what we're doing is drawing strength and energy from each other, right? Now you can do this. Let's just change it. Keep it going, gentle and easy. Let's just change this, and I want you to imagine a lake. Send your energy out over the water, and then pull from the water, from the lake, the energy you need. Send your energy out, release your tension, and pull in what you need. So let's exhale. And nice. Inhale. Beautiful. And I see some of you are closing your eyes. Gorgeous. Inhale. Now, open the eyes if you had them closed. One last thing. We're going to start to a little circle. And this is a wonderful Qigong exercise. And just feel like you're renewing your energy, recycling, right? And see if you can go a little slower. There it is. Nice, Stephanie. There you go. Nice. A little slower. And then reverse. Release a little more of the effort and add a smile. There you go. It makes it easier. Now I notice that I feel it a little bit in my shoulder, so I'm going to keep going, but I'm going to let go of the tension. And last time, send the energy out. And back in. And remember with Edie, we went row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Pressing the hands together in effort, but not in strain. Bring your hands together now. Press them in strain. Release. We want to see if we can have enough tension to feel dynamic, but enough ease to feel efficiency. And my question for you this summer, as we come out of the pandemic, because our energy is somewhat depleted, right? Can we use maximum efficiency with minimal effort? Can we let our energy help us? Can we monitor it with sleep, with good food, with good social interactions, being in nature, taking time to breathe, taking time to touch ourselves? And then, after we've put on our mask, helping others, right? Yeah. So to close, I'm going to have Phoebe close.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Caroline, for such a magical ending. And Barbara Fredrickson says that the micro moments, the little positive emotions, the experiences are the tiny engines that we can rev through our choices. So we hope that you will take these practices, these micro practices, whether it's moving slowly or moving incrementally or looking at the different activities you can prioritize throughout your day. And with the me search in mind, just experiment and then come back in a few weeks and let us know. Next week we'll be off for our own restorative time. So we really welcome you to do your research and prioritize your positivity in the SPIRE dimensions. And then on Tuesday, the 13th, we have Rabbi Deb Orenston, who's going to be talking about gratitude and hope through a Jewish lens. She'll be back in August, also right before the high holidays, talking about positive psychology and Jewish themes. We have an amazing lineup for July and August, so we will see you. You'll get the recordings tomorrow with all of our slides. And Caroline, thank you so much for partnering today. It was just a wonderful, inspired presentation to co-present with you. And also we teach what we need to learn. So I'm going to go and do my own SPIRE assessment and see what comes up.
Yeah, Phoebe, always a pleasure. And I want to remind everybody that if you're interested in the SIP, Positive Certificate in Positive Psychology, they are the next cohort. They're signing up for that. And I put something in the chat. And some of you have expressed that this is on your bucket list. And it's a wonderful way to re-enter our new world. So I highly recommend it.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. See you all next time.
Phoebe. Bye,
Feel free to
Caroline.
unmute.
Have a good weekend.
Happy 4th of July.
Rest and
Happy July
relax.
4th, everybody.
Happy
Bye,
4th of
everybody.
July.
Happy 4th. Happy summer.
Happy 4th. Bye-bye. Stay
Bye.
well.
Bye. Thank you.
Happy July.
On the 6th or the 8th.